folks, these games are dark. It's in the damn name, for Pete's sake. Demon's Souls verged into the realm of wretched horror at times. The Dark Souls series features some of the bleakest and most depressing moments I've ever experienced in a game. Dark Souls 3 in particular. Bloodborne is a bestial, blood-drenched romp through a cosmically cursed city of nightmares. Sekiro takes the concept of immortality and corrupts it into something hideous and rotten. And Elden Ring and its DLC have their feet firmly planted in the realm of divine horror. But, however, there's a lot of beauty to be found in these games too. Beauty made all the more special by being juxtaposed against so much darkness and decay. I recently put out a video featuring what I considered to be the 20 most disturbing monsters in all of Fromsoft's modern games. Stuff like Osiris, the infested monks, the bloated head patients, etc. But now I do believe it's time to highlight the other end of the spectrum. And so in this video, I'll discuss what I think are Fromsoft's 20 most beautiful monsters. Both regular enemies and bosses are included here, though I have made the decision to not include any human entities or dudes in armour, even if I do find some of those dudes to be very attractive. So with all that said, let us fanny about no longer and kick off the countdown. Enjoy. We're starting things off with some Dark Souls 1, and just a heads up here, the first Dark Souls game will be getting a whole lot of love from me in this video, which I'm very pleased about, that I can repeatedly tell my very first Souls game that, even though it's old as hell now, I still find it attractive. A very small but still quite important level in Dark Souls 1 is the Valley of the Drakes. There's really not all that much to see or explore here, but rather its importance lies in the fact that it connects together Blighttown, Upper New Londo, and once you flood it further into the game, Lower New Londo ruins. You can literally make it to the Valley of the Drakes from Firelink Shrine in just 40 seconds as long as you have the Master Key, but watch out, dumbass. There's a massive, rotting, puking undead dragon head up here, ready to one-shot KO any foolhardy noob tempted by the Astoris Straightsword. What's that beyond the dragon though? Those small blue beings guarding the bridge to Lower New Londo. Those are the Blue Drakes, and I think they look rather swell. Even though the Valley of the Drakes really does only exist as a nexus point of sorts to other levels rather than it being a level of any significance in its own right, the presence of the Blue Drakes has always made it feel somewhat special in my eyes. Not least of all because this is the only place in the game where they appear, and in great number too. They actually heavily resemble the Hellkite Drake, except instead of them being vast and red, they are wee and blue. Though in that room in Anor Londo Castle where you get the Silver Knight set, the heads of larger blue drakes can be seen mounted on the wall. A major difference between these drakes and the Hellkite is that these little fellas have no capacity to breathe fire, instead only being capable of sending forth lightning from their mouths, which is intriguing considering the fact that lightning is meant to be the ultimate weakness of dragons in the Dark Souls universe. I guess pushing the idea that these smaller offshoot races are a far cry from the mighty everlasting dragons of old. I've included the blue drakes here because I find their colour to be extremely eye-catching, and the streams of lightning which frequently stream from the draconic maws only makes this more so. They ain't exactly a joy to fight, especially with how many of them are grouped together here, but I still enjoy the sight of them roaming and hovering around in this strange little level. Look, I know there are going to be some folk down in the comments who'll say, "You seriously put a slug ahead of a drake in your list?" And look, you make a good point there, commenter who only exists in my head. All I'll say in my defence is that this cave at the end of the second level of Demon's Souls' Shrine of Storms is stunning. And while the phosphorescent slugs aren't the only contributor to that, they do matter. Very weird and interesting room with its shimmering luminescence, flowing fulminating balls of magical energy and the strange pools of milky fluid and coral encrusted walls. It almost feels like you're at the bottom of some strange isolated sea here. The slugs though, ladies and gentlemen, oh the slugs, oh. Now, If you're going for the large sword of moonlight in the Valley of Defilement, then there's nothing pretty about those slugs whatsoever. There's a writhing multitude of them suckling on the legendary weapon. See how they suck. And it's rather disgusting, and they look slightly different here. All gross and brown, reflecting the thick filth in which they dwell. The slugs in the Shrine of Storms, on the other hand, look significantly more pleasant. There's a pale green glow radiating from their bodies that I really like, and also they kind of remind me of the phantasms from Bloodborne. Don't get me wrong, I get just as sick at the bloody sight of these glowing gastropods as the next person after I've spent a damn hour farming sticky white stuff and suckerstone chunks, but even so, I just had to shine this spotlight on the phosphorescent slugs for this video. Congratulations, slugs. For number 18, I want to return to Dark Souls 1 for a bit, please. To the dense depths of Darkroot Forest, where the mushroom men roam. Now, I'll be the first to throw up my hands and admit that these enemies are absolutely terrifying. You'll get no arguments to the contrary from me on that. But I've always found something about their appearance to be strangely enchanting, and yes, quite beautiful. Darkroot Forest is a big place with a lot of scope for exploration, with most of that exploration being optional. The only thing you have to do in this level is nail Sif, after which you can piss off and never return. If you decide to stray off the beaten path, however, or if you've got a mind to pick up the enchanted Ember key item, then you're inevitably going to find yourself coming face to fungal face with some mushroom children, and a mushroom man, and maybe their mushroom mama. The wee ones are disarmingly cute and quite exploratory. You'll spy them playfully plodding around small sections of the forest, though if you get close enough they will approach and sort of try and attack you, kinda, and then fall flat on their dumb faces. Such fungal frolicking will attract the attention of the larger kind though, particularly if you decide to attack one of their children who, upon dying, make a noise so sad that it actually hurts my heart. Do not be lulled into a false sense of security by the ineffectiveness of the small mushrooms, however, because although the large ones don't necessarily look overtly malevolent, they are, and they will punch you. The attack will have way more range than you expected, and it'll deal way more damage than you expected. Seriously, if I had $1 for every time I thought I was a safe distance away, only for the punch to nail me anyway, I'd probably have about, like $7 actually, nothing that crazy. Also, we don't use dollars here in Scotland, we use pounds. Anyway. Yes, the mushroom people are deceptively dangerous and menacing, both in Darkroot Forest and later on in the Great Hollow. I mean, unless I'm mistaken and that's actually mud, the large ones appear to have bloodstains over their fists and torsos for God's sake, as if to say, hey, don't fuck with me or my damn kids. But even so, like I said, there's something really enchanting about them. Most enemies in Dark Souls look like they're out to get you, because they are out to get you. But for the mushroom people, their placement here in the deep forest makes it seem like they're simply trying to hide and survive, and the only reason the large ones try and punch you to death is to protect their young. In Ulusil Sanctuary within the DLC, you can meet Elizabeth, who looks almost identical to the kind we are familiar with, minus the terrifying bloodstains, and also she is affixed to the wall rather than being capable of walking. Most significantly of all, however, she's a damn sweetheart who teaches golden sorceries and advises you on saving Princess Dusk, and she has a lovely voice. Same voice actress who played one of the Firekeepers in Dark Souls 2.
This one. From what faraway age hast thou come? Thy scent is very human indeed.
What seems to be the ruckus?
Oh my, your face.
Speaking of Dark Souls 2, the mushroom people would not make a repeat appearance in that game, though the Elizabeth mushroom persisted as an extremely effective healing item. This healing item would not return for Dark Souls 3, but the original enemy did return, so let's go pay them a visit. Oh god, I'm so excited to see the mushroom people again. When I see my mushroom papa, I'm going to kiss him right in the cap. And when I see my mushroom mama, I'm going to smooch her right in the... A ring. No. Let's go all the way to Elden Ring for number 17, to the damn DLC in fact, because I have chosen the Erdtree avatar. We're still in that area of the list where my monster choices have a bit of an edge to them, I know, but the most beautiful, striking and memorable malefactors are still to come. First things first, the Erdtree base which makes up the boss arena is right up there as one of the most stunning Fromsoft boss arenas for sure. This shallow sea of black and gold, directly beneath the strange and phantasmal form of the Erdtree. Nearly everything associated with the lands between's Erdtree is of a pure and radiant gold, but everything associated with the Erdtree is tinged with a dark umbral edge, including the Erdtree avatar. Very interesting that the Erdtree avatar takes on the form of a gnarled colossal shadow sunflower, because the Erdtree itself does not resemble a sunflower at all, but then I guess the Erdtree doesn't exactly resemble any of its avatars either, does it? Shadow sunflowers do grow around the Erdtree though, and are said to be infused with profound holiness, hence why they're used to craft some of the most powerful holy items. As for the boss itself, well, regardless of what you think of sunflowers, it certainly is rather monstrous in appearance. It's like Fromsoft took that massive sunflower in the middle of the Living Failures boss arena in Bloodborne and made a damn monster out of it, and to great effect. I think this is a very fun boss with an awesome design, but beautiful though? Well, I confess, were it not for one single attack that this boss does in Phase 3 and Phase 3 only, I would not be including it on this list. But at the start of that phase, the Erdtree avatar lets off its golden flash, and this is one of my all-time favourite moves by any enemy or boss ever in any game. The way it shifts itself into the near exact shape of the Erdtree to unleash this holy golden explosion is incredible, and the final time it does this attack, when at critical HP, the intensity and beauty is multiplied threefold as it unleashes every remaining ounce of energy before leaving itself open for your finishing blow. Very cool boss with an awesome design, but my god, I find the aesthetics and implications of this attack to be damn near transcendent. But if you thought we were completely done with flowers in this video, then think again, because at number 16 I have the Miranda flowers. You'll notice that I said flowers, plural there, rather than flower. And that's not just because there are a whole bunch of Miranda flowers through the lands between and even the realm of shadow, but also because there are many variants with different appearances, attacks and associated negative status effects. And these flailing floral fiends even appear as dungeon bosses in a couple of places. Somewhat similarly to the aforementioned mushroom people, the Miranda flowers always have much smaller flowers around them who'll draw closer to you and pervade the air with their harmful pollen. Though unlike the mushrooms, I never feel too sad about taking these things down, because there's nothing actually childlike about them, it's just a flower, and they don't make a sad bird noise when vanquished. As for the big ones, the colour patterns on their petals vary quite significantly depending on the variant. The poison flower's petals are pink, the rottens are red and black, the frenzy flowers have a sort of scorched black look, the magic ones are a really beautiful cosmic blue, and you can find yellow ones in the realm of shadow which I think are unique to the DLC. My personal favourite Miranda flowers though are those found in the Perfumer's Grotto in Altus Plateau, featuring petals of yellow, white and purple. Just like the regular toxic ones, their element of choice is poison, but that mixture of colours is gorgeous. That's not to say that Miranda flowers are just pictures of loveliness, of course. The game literally describes them as being man-eating flowers. They attack you quite brutally by slamming their heads down at you, and there's also something quite disconcerting and uncanny about how large they are, and how you can clearly make out different sections of their bodies which actually correspond with the traditional anatomy of a flower, like their stamen raised in the air. I apologise if I got that wrong, by the way. I'm just using some diagrams of flowers from Google Images as a point of reference here. I'm no scientist. There's more to the Miranda flowers than just different colours and status effects though, because a couple of them do have unique behaviours. My favourite is the frenzy ones who, after being hit with fire, go absolutely f***ing mental. It's pretty terrifying but also super cool, because as far as I know, none of the others do this upon being set alight. The magic ones in Liurnia are also unique, with their main medium to long range attack being a homing shower of glintstone particles, which are actually kind of a pain in the arse to avoid, even if the attack does look quite lovely. Every other type of flower, however, uses what can only be described as just divine powers of light from Dark Souls 3, or alternatively, the light of Mikola as featured in the DLC. I've always found this attack to be super interesting because nothing about these enemies seems all that holy, and yet there is something distinctly heavenly about the appearance and nature of this attack, especially with the way the flowers elevate their heads skyward to initiate the move, as if to channel and attune themselves to some higher source of divine energy. In conclusion, although the Miranda flowers certainly do have an unsettling edge to their designs and behaviours, they also possess an equally interesting natural, colourful and even divine beauty. I think that's quite enough slugs, mushrooms and flowers for now, so for number 15, let's take a trip back to Dark Souls 1 for a spell, to talk about the crystal golems. We already spoke about Darkroot Forest, but who could forget Darkroot Basin? Sure, there are more than a few strange and dangerous manners of creature roaming the upper levels, but the basin is home to far stranger and more dangerous entities still, featuring a Black Knight, fingers crossed for a halberd drop. Yes! The Abyssal Hydra, who looks incredible but, much like the Hellkite Drake, actually completely sucks to fight. And last but not least, the Crystal Golems, and a big group of them too. You can make it to Darkroot Basin really early on in a playthrough, but depending on your weapon, these golems can be very tough to take down, boasting around 400 HP each, though a profoundly welcome feature here is that the Hydra's water projectiles do deal friendly damage to the golems. It's actually pretty fun to try and bait them into getting nailed, without you having to do shit yourself. There's really no clear immediate explanation as to why these golems are down here in the forest or even what they are. I mean, you can fight some weird enemies on the way here, including a freaking tree and these weird flat fish things, but the golems are far more anomalous in appearance, looking like accumulations of blue quartz who have came to life and started running amok in the forest. When you later come across them once again in the Duke's archives though, makes more sense. This is a location of focused intelligence and crystal sorcery, being the residence of Seath the Scaleless, and indeed the appearance of the crystal golems, as well as their AoE attacks, very much resembles the manner of crystal sorcery favoured by the Pale Drake. Thus, the golems are automatons of crystal, given life by Seath for the purposes of preventing any intruders from delving too far into the crystal caves, though some, those coloured a radiant gold, are also used to abduct people, specifically women. We can see this in the case of Siegmeyer's daughter, Sieglind, and also Dusk of Ulasil, both of whom can be seen trapped helplessly in the large crystal jutting out the top of the golden golem's back. Based on this behaviour, we can discern that the golems might also have been responsible for kidnapping maidens and delivering them to the archives to be experimented on and turned into the weeping blue octopus ladies we see in the prison section, though from the item description of the Channeler's Trident, we know that those dancing buffoons also play a part in collecting human specimens. Back to the golems though, they just look incredible and really typify that distinctive visual style so heavily featured in the first Dark Souls game. Despite the game's age, the enemies and objects still look so colourful and clean, and many of its levels carry these thick atmospheres and ambiances which make travelling through them so uniquely enjoyable. This is certainly the case in the Crystal Caves with its colossal columns of crystal, the same columns which the golems were clearly carved out of before being gifted with life. At number 14, I'd like to pay another visit to the realm of Shadow, not to talk about the mighty and massive Shadow Tree avatar, but instead to discuss something much smaller and more humble, the blue worms or spirit eels, or whatever the hell they're called. Not every enemy in a Fromsoft game needs to be big and ferocious, there to smash, slash or swipe you to death with a suite of nasty attacks, and now back to the bonfire or sight of grace you go. I say, no. Sometimes what you need is some living scenery, some non-hostiles there to pique your interest, and to add flavour and mystique to the level, and to the game as a whole to a certain extent, which I think the blue worms certainly do. Of course, Elden Ring's base game kinda had its own blue worms, with those bizarre clusters of spheres which typically gathered around Everjails. They weren't actually a threat, they just looked cool and made you think, what the hell am I even looking at? Well, right from the DLC's outset in Gravesite Plain, you are presented with the strange, slender forms of the blue worms. There are a lot of them, they're non-hostile, and you see them in several other regions too, always grouped together and always with that weird bowling ball-esque O-face expression. They always look absolutely shocked. Although the blue worms certainly don't look remotely human in the face or body, they do have strangely human hands and arms, permanently fixed in position just below the head portion. Not sure why. Usually the worms are already up and out of the ground by the time you see them, but they can rise up to meet you in some places, like on the way towards the Great Fissure in Cerulean Coast, and it's quite endearing, like they're popping up to say hello and wish you well, just for God's sake don't attack them. Like I said back in my Shadow of the Erdtree review, when aggroed, the worms really remind me of these things from the Ghost Train level of Cuphead. The likeness is uncanny. Except instead of these things shooting lightning from their mouths, they seem to spew up their own guts, and if this hits you, your stamina gets absolutely decimated. Though more dangerously than that, they will typically spin and slam their engorged red heads around, making it hard as hell to get close for an attack. Especially seeing as how even attacking just one will make every worm in the area become aggroed, exactly like the spirit jellyfish from the base game. Also, although I somehow completely missed them on my first playthrough, in Cerulean Coast's coastal cave you can also find completely vertical worms who will swell and then explode when you get too close, which is another similarity they have with some stone clusters from the base game. I know the blue worms are hardly the grandest or most detailed enemy on this list, but their strange and simple design and spectral blue colour really appealed to me, to the extent that I couldn't imagine the Realm of Shadow without them. Okay, we already had a sort of dragon way back at number 20 with the blue drakes, but those beasts are far from mighty, and certainly do not compare to the powerful magnificence of a true dragon. And so, for number 13, it's time to shine the spotlight on something a lot bigger and more badass. It's Elden Ring's own ancient dragon, Lansseax. Now, Elden Ring is a game with a dizzying variety of dragons of varying size, strength level and element, and pretty much all of them look sick and intimidating in different ways. The offshoot races such as the magma worms and dragonkin are probably the most grotesque and abhorrent. But then you've also got the ghost flame dragons and fortisacs, who are far more deathly and corrupted in appearance. My personal all-time favourite Fromsoft dragon design has to go to Placidusax, the vast and craggy multi-headed lord of dragons who dwells outside of time in crumbling Faram Azula. But for as awesome as Placidusax looks, and for as much of a spectacle as the battle with him is, with his airborne assaults of red lightning and golden lasers, he sure ain't that pretty. Lansseax though, the sister of Fortisax, yeah, she's pretty hot. Well, not hot, but you guys know what I mean. Something that sets Lansseax apart from most other dragons in Elden Ring is that she is an ancient dragon, possessing scales with the appearance of pale stone, 2 sets of wings and 2 pairs of legs, as opposed to just the 1 set of wings and pair of legs, like the lesser named dragons have, and wings coloured with the glint of gold on the inside. She also has the ability to call forth red lightning. In fact, during the fight with Lansseax, you'll likely see her use red lightning attacks far more than fire ones, with her most powerful one being Lansseax's Glaive, an ability which looks somewhat similar to Fortisax's lightning spear, as used by her death-blighted brother. You'll first see Lanciacs very briefly if you ascend to Altus Plateau via the ruin-strewn precipice instead of the grand lift of Dectus, where she will batter you about for a good 20 seconds before quite literally dematerialising, not entirely dissimilar to how Placidusax has the power to dematerialise. Not too far from Leyndell though, she'll come hurtling back down for a decisive battle. Mind you, there is also that first ancient dragon that comes at you near the start of Crumbling Farama's Ewa, who looks exactly like Lanciax and who even uses Lanciax's glaive. I remember some commenter on one of my older videos who said this actually was Lanciax, as well as every other ancient dragon we fight in Farama's Ewa, but I'm pretty sure that's not true. This is just another ancient dragon, and a bloody horrible one too, might I add. Yes, it might look as incredible as Lanciax, but without any of the charm, because for some reason Fromsoft gave it about 3 times as much health as it probably should have had. And while we're on the topic, Senisax from the DLC is a dickhead as well, and possibly the worst boss fight in the entire DLC, I reckon. Back to Lanciax though, I like her a lot. Although she certainly looks big, powerful and bestial, there's still an ancient and intelligent aura of draconic nobility to her pale and golden design. And the optional encounter with her also carries some compelling lore significance, with how she is freely flying around in Altus Plateau, whilst her fallen brother is trapped in the dream of a soulless god. Let's stick with Elden Ring some more for number 12, to talk about one of the most mysterious beings in the game, the Oracle Envoys. The first time you finally make it to Leyndell Royal Capital is a very special moment indeed. Throughout your whole playthrough up until this point, you are journeying closer and closer to the Erdtree, taking out demigods and dragons along the way, and then you ascend to Altus Plateau and see the tree looming larger than ever before, finally seeming somewhat reachable, with the intensity of your anticipation growing as it draws nearer. It's also not unreasonable to assume that the end of the game might be approaching here, because unless you've been looking ahead online, Altus Plateau sure does feel like it might be the final region. And those feelings of finality and enormity and divinity reach a maximum when you enter the royal capital to see the Erdtree looking impossibly vast, far larger than you might have initially assumed. You've got the incandescent golden monolith that is the Erdtree looming overhead, the shell of a once great city down below, and the impaled corpse of a mega dragon watching over it all in death. And it's a hell of a lot to take in, but just off to the side, a strange high-pitched piping can be heard, being emitted from the golden horns of the Oracle Envoys, an enemy also found in Miquella's Haligtree. Profoundly strange looking creatures, being nearly totally covered in patterned robes of pristine white. Only their pale slender arms and lower faces are exposed, with at least their mouths and noses looking somewhat human if nothing else. The Oracle Envoys do not have legs, with their lower bodies being bundled up in their robes to form a sort of half sphere, like Bugenhagen from FF7, with their main means of movement being this weird sort of slanted rolling. Even stranger than their lower bodies though are their heads, which are also bundled up and hanging behind them, as if to conceal some secret not meant for eyes. Indeed, the item description for the Oracle Envoy crown reads, "No one knows what the cloth hides, but some claim to have heard a faint whimpering from inside. It must have been their imagination." You also come across the larger variants in Leyndell, wielding much larger horns for more substantial bubble-based attacks and harder hits, though even more notably than these ones are the 3 giant Oracle Envoys in Miquella's Haligtree, possessing larger horns still for supremely dangerous attacks. I'm sure we've all been nailed at least once when trying to run down this stupid goddamn branch. The most significant aspect of these ones, however, is that they are so large that their robes can't conceal their enormity, exposing the bulbous, streaky light blue flesh of their lower bodies. To To tell you the truth, I'd never even noticed this before because I'd somehow never actually gotten up close and personal with a giant Oracle Envoy before recording footage for this video, but yes, admittedly, it's quite disgusting and disturbing, somewhat dispelling the otherwise pure and divine appearance of these profoundly odd entities. The item description for the Oracle Envoy's Spirit Ash describes them as being monstrous musicians who employ sacred arts. It is said that when Oracle Envoys appear, playing their pipes, they do so to herald the arrival of a new god or age. This clearly has significance in the two places they appear. They're present in Leyndell, home to the Erdtree, where a new Elden Lord will soon take the throne, bringing about a new age. And they're also present in Miquella's Tree, with Miquella, as we know from the DLC, having aspirations towards becoming a god, though of course the Empyrean isn't physically present in the Tree when we reach it. There is a definite element of creepy grotesqueness to the Oracle Envoys, yes, but you can say that about nearly anything from these games. I'll just never forget that feeling of seeing them when I first made it to Leyndell. It truly was a momentous, mysterious and beautiful moment, particularly with how the sounds they make with their horns complement the soundtrack for Leyndell in such a lovely and organic way. It's amazing, this level's amazing, and I find the Oracle Envoys to be rather divine. Finally, some Sekiro, hell yeah. Though if you're expecting any Bloodborne in this video, I'll level with you now, there is no Bloodborne in this video. I love Bloodborne, and it was perfect for my video on the most disturbing Fromsoft monsters, but turns out it's not so great for a video on the most beautiful ones. Never mind that though, because at number 11 I have the Okami Warriors of Fountainhead Palace. I know I said in the intro that I'd not feature any dudes in armour, but 1. The Okami Warriors aren't dudes, they're female. And 2, more seriously, they're not technically human. In fact, the item description for the Sabimaru even describes them as being inhuman, so I'm allowing it. Sue me. Fountainhead Palace is majestic. The cutscene of you making it there within that colossal rope creature is amazing, and when you get your first good look at the expansive watery palace after defeating the true corrupted monk with that divine soundtrack playing, you know you are in for a treat. As is almost always the case with FromSoft's prettiest places though, that prettiness masks an awful lot of ugliness. The palace nobles in particular are really quite grotesque, these slithering slug-like stealers of youth. They suck, quite literally. They're not the only higher beings to be found in Fountainhead though, because while the nobles slither and skulk in their temples and gardens, the Okami warriors stand watch for intruders, on the rooftops, in the corridors, and even on the end of an enormous tree where one repeatedly kicks projectiles at you. Final Fantasy X Blitzball style, Ject Shot Mark III. The Okami warriors are also strange looking, with pale skin and elongated necks, but they lack all the loathsomeness of the nobles, instead possessing a strong warrior's poise. They come in several different varieties, with some sporting bows, swords, naginatas and ball projectiles, though regardless of which kind you're fighting, they all have this really endearing but tricky, bouncing dance-like quality to their attacks and movements, making it that much harder to time your deflections, particularly if there's a few of them bouncing after you at the one time. The Okami warriors are also one of the few enemies in the game capable of throwing out lightning attacks, an ability which also extends to their dogs, funnily enough. The Okami warriors certainly aren't as outlandish and gloriously incandescent as the other entries in my list here, but I still couldn't not include them, because even when they're absolutely kicking my arse, I like them, and I enjoy their strange otherworldly charm, like when you see them chilling out and kicking a ball around. Like I said, Fountainhead Palace is a truly beautiful level, but I don't think it would feel quite so divine without the Okami warriors. Right then, here we are at the top 10, and to kick it off, I'm going to do something a wee bit unconventional and include two completely different creatures from two different games here. Elden Ring's Red Wolf of Radagon, and Dark Souls 3's Grave Tender Great Wolf. Reason I'm doing this is because 1, I just feel like it, and 2, I'm doing a 2-for-1 offer here, because even though they are different entities, they're very similar in appearance. They're both big scary wolves, so why not? Mind you, even if they do look similar, their natures are distinct. The Red Wolf of Radagon is particularly notable for its use of glintstone sorcery. Indeed, you encounter it in the very home of sorcery, in the Academy of Rea Lucaria, where Radagon once dwelled, before leaving behind poor Renala, as well as his big red dog, one which shares the same colour of hair as the absent god of the Golden Order. Even though it would have been cooler if it was, this wolf is not unique. There's also the Red Wolf of the Champion in Gelmir Hero's Grave, who is just a straight up clone of this boss, but with more health, and you also have a few lesser Red Wolves running around the lands between, who lack the ability to strike out with spectral red swords held in their mouths. I actually can't stand fighting these things because their bites just come out too quickly and suddenly for me to react to, and they have caused me many a death. Gameplay frustrations aside though, and even though I don't rate this boss or enemy all that highly on the fun to fight scale, they do look beautiful. They are very large, but there's really nothing monstrous about their appearance. Wolves are beautiful creatures, and these red wolves have that same beauty, except even more so with their flowing red fur and spectral sorcery. And then we've got the Grave Tender Great Wolf, not from Elden Ring but from Dark Souls 3, the Ashes of Ariandel DLC to be specific. The first enemy you encounter upon passing into the painted world of Ariandel are the Followers, of which there are many, initially obscured by the blinding blizzard. There might even be too many of them for you to handle, and so many players will flee in the other direction, except this is a cunning trap, dropping you into an area crawling with wolves. It's not the wee ones we're concerned with though, but the alpha male, sitting and staring silently from above before howling into the sky and leaping down to take out its prey. It's actually impossible to truly kill the Great Wolf here, but you can at least defeat it temporarily, though not for long, with it again appearing just beyond the Millwood settlement, populated by mighty knights who fight alongside the wolves in battle. The Great Wolf can only be properly fought at the bottom of Ariandel, where it appears alongside the DLC's optional boss, the Champion's Grave Tender. The thing about the Champion's Grave Tender is that he doesn't seem to be wearing any trousers for some reason, and he sucks as a boss. Let me make it crystal clear that the Champion's Grave Tender is not included in this list. Put on some trousers first, then we'll talk turkey. The Grave Tender Great Wolf is also not wearing any trousers, granted, but I don't mind, because just as with the Red Wolf of Radagon, beautiful creature. Again, it's enormous, but not to the point of horror. Rather, it's like a regular wolf, but bigger, faster and certainly more powerful, though it does have the unique ability to breathe streams of frost from its mouth. And there you have it, there's a couple of lovely wolves for you, double whammy, though I hope you aren't too wolfed out from these wolves, because I'll be talking about yet another particularly wolfish wolf just a bit later, the wolfiest wolf who has ever wolved. Wolf me daddy! For number 9 I have the biggest creature to feature so far, one I've already mentioned in passing. It's Seath the Scaleless, an entity you'll first lay your eyes on in that iconic opening cinematic, with the ancient Pale Drake being partly responsible for the beginning of the Age of Fire, after revealing to Lord Gwyn the everlasting dragon's weakness to lightning. Intro aside though, you won't be clapping eyes on Seath in the flesh until making it to the Duke's archives, though you may well encounter some other weird ass dragons throughout your journey, like the Gaping Dragon and the Undead Dragon, and you can even gain an audience with an everlasting dragon at Ash Lake, perhaps the only one to escape Gwyn's wrath. Wow, what a marvellous creature. So let's just fucking hack off its tail, I guess. For as monstrous, rancid and ancient as these dragons may be, however, nothing really compares to the radiant magnificence of the Pale Drake, initially encased in a bed of crystal at the top of the archives, where it is completely invulnerable to all damage. Fromsoft have several previous examples of bosses which the player is expected and largely intended to get beaten down by, but who are still technically possible to defeat if you're good enough, but that's not the case with Seath, who is totally immortal at this point. Mechanics aside though, my god, what an amazing looking entity. This crystal dragon with his strange pale skin, lacking the rough scales usually possessed by dragons, and his two sets of pinkish wings make him look like some sort of giant angelic draconic butterfly. Of course, the true fight is further ahead in the Crystal Caves, where Seath's fragile crystal of immortality is secreted beyond the butterflies, golems, and clams. Here we see Seath's form in its entirety, revealing the bizarre trio of tentacles which make up the base of his body. Seath doesn't so much walk as slither like some sort of massive phosphorescent slug. I do really love the tentacle aspect of Seath's appearance, except when I'm trying to get the Moonlight Greatsword of course, then I curse it. But at the same time, Seath the Scaleless would probably be much higher up in my list of beauty if his lower body more resembled that of a regular dragon. I still think he looks stunning, but that beauty is somewhat compromised by the odd grotesqueness of his anomalous form. While Seath does not make a reappearance in Dark Souls 2, there are a couple of references to him. The old Pale Drake soul, wrought by Jukesteer Freya in New Game Plus, can be traded in for the Moonlight Greatsword, the item description of which states that the sword was born from an ancient pale being. Dark Souls 3 would be far bolder with the Seath references, even mentioning the dragon by name and the item descriptions for the White Dragon Breath sorcery and the Soul of Osiros, because indeed, the heretical wax-wearing scholars of the Grand Archives are devotees of Seath's crystal sorcery. Another individual who developed an obsession with the Pale Drake was Osiros, who sports similarly pale skin to Seath. The difference is that Osiros was not born a dragon, but instead was transformed into one through unspeakable experimentation. Furthermore, he's much smaller and more slender, and does not boast a true set of wings, and is all round extremely hideous. In fact, in my video on FromSoft's most disturbing monsters, I went so far as to place Osiros in the number 3 spot. He doesn't even have any eyes, for Christ's sake. No. Osiros is but a pale imitation of the original, dare I say, beautiful Pale Drake. At number 8, I have an entity which may well surprise some people. For as appealing as their designs may be, some, if not most, of the monsters I've discussed thus far in this video have had certain elements and aspects of strangeness or even horror to their designs. But here I have perhaps the darkest entity yet, the Humanity Sprites. Rather unique thing about Humanity right off the bat is that it is simultaneously an enemy, a mechanic, and an item. On the mechanic side of things, it's one of those things that a lot of folk, myself included, barely even understood the very first time we played Dark Souls. Saw this number at the top left and didn't know what it meant. Saw the reverse hollowing option when sitting at a bonfire and didn't really know what it meant or why I should do it. Same with kindling, but all these involve humanity, which, now that I think about it, operates not too dissimilarly to the insight system from Bloodborne. You occasionally get soft humanity added to the counter when killing an enemy, providing the level boss hasn't been beaten yet, but you'll also find hard humanity, poppable items which add to your soft humanity counter, allowing you to kindle at bonfires for more Estus uses, increasing your item discovery and raising your curse resistance. These items come in both singular and twin varieties, with both having slightly indiscernible icons, looking like vaguely ovoid smoky black tears with white-grey outlines, and the item descriptions are even vaguer. This black sprite is called Humanity, but little is known about its true nature. If the soul is the source of all life, then what distinguishes the humanity we hold within ourselves? Well, in the Artorias of the Abyss DLC, you eventually make it to the very chasm of the Abyss, directly below Ulasil, partially populated by horribly mutated residents of the fallen city, but upon descending further into the inky depths of the Abyss, the shimmering black shapes of humanity gradually come into view, not as items, but as living, moving beings. Like most people, I like the Erdtree of the Abyss DLC. For as great as its boss fights are though, I wouldn't quite go as far as to say I love it. I just think it's very good. I also don't really love the Chasm of the Abyss, though it's certainly nowhere near as big a ball ache as the Tomb of the Giants. I do, however, adore these enemies, and the gentle way they are revealed the further you make it through this level. They barely have any visual details, they literally don't have actual attack animations, instead harming you through contact damage alone, and they're not even very fun to fight, but it doesn't really matter, because there's still something darkly beautiful about their appearance. They are enemies and will kill you if you stand around with your thumb up your arse when there's a bunch of them around, but because the only vaguely expressive thing about them is a single pair of blinking white eyes, there's really no aura of malevolence about them, not like there is with, say, Manus. I also like how they come in 3 different sizes, just like the Oracle Envoys, except for this enemy, all 3 variants do otherwise look identical. I like to imagine them as being a baby humanity, a mama humanity, and a papa humanity, it's a family unit. All that said, none of their mysterious charm has ever stopped me from farming the shit out of them for humanity items. The humanity sprites are a perfect example of an enemy that really aren't pretty or colourful or even detailed. It's the quiet simplicity of their design that makes them so compelling to me. Something doesn't need to be super detailed to be beautiful and interesting, and I guess the lads over at Team Cherry feel similarly, because a very similar design is present in that game, particularly in the level called The Abyss. Humanity would not return as an enemy item or mechanic in Dark Souls 2, where it was instead replaced by human effigies, and then Dark Souls 3 had its embers, though in the swamp of the Ringed City, if you happen to cast the Chameleon sorcery or use a young white branch whilst partially submerged in the fetid mire, you might just see an old familiar face. No, not that. Let's try again. Oh, for fuck's sake. Aha. Finally, some Dark Souls 2. I bet you thought I'd never have anything from it, but here we are, and I'm glad for it. And it's kind of another 2-in-1 or even 3-in-1 deal, because at number 7 we have Ava the King's Pet, and also Lud and Zawin, also the King's Pets. Folks, if you're new to my channel, first off, welcome, and thank you for watching and sticking around past the halfway point. Many do not. But secondly, you need to understand something about Candle Type 1A, that my long-time viewers have already had hammered home to them on multiple occasions. I love cats. I wish I was a dogman, and I do like dogs, but few things in life can get me smiling and laughing like a nice fluffy puss. My personal favourite type of cat video are those where they make silly noises. That's the good stuff. And that brings us, eventually, to Ava, the first boss of the third Dark Souls 2 DLC, the Crown of the Ivory King. It's a big old kitty cat. Here's the problem though. You can't actually see the damn thing. You can take on Ava right after warping to Elaim Lois, but while the King's Pet is here to meet you, and while it absolutely can and likely will kill you, and while you technically can kill it at this point, Ava is invisible, and will remain so until you come back with the Priestess Eye item, located further on through the level. Once the item is obtained, Ava can be fought conventionally, though certainly not easily, but importantly, look at all that fluff. Now, silliness aside for a second, I don't actually think Ava really looks cute. It's no Shalquar, that's for sure. There's only one Shalquar, but it certainly does look radiant, powerful and majestic, as do most big cats in real life, and this is one big cat. Ava makes for a pretty damn decent boss fight too, boasting a suite of savage melee attacks from its teeth and claws, but also having some sorcery capabilities to mix things up. Like I said though, Ava ain't the end of the story, because there's also Lod and Zalin, the king's other pets, secluded at the farthest end of the frigid outskirts, and whereas Ava is bright white, Lod and Zalin are dark and smoky, and somewhat smaller, though from what I can tell, their movesets are just about identical. I'll be honest, I've only beaten Lod and Zalin like once in my entire life. Not because the fight with them is necessarily terrible, though it ain't great, but because of the shit you have to go through to get to it, and then again every time you die. Even though Lod and Zalin aren't as visually radiant as Ava, they still do look great, though my main pick here does go to the king's favourite pet, the biggest and brightest cat to appear in the entire Dark Souls trilogy. At number 6 we have Elden Ring's Regal Ancestor Spirit. This is an optional remembrance boss found in the Ancestral Wood section of Nokron, reachable by lighting all 6 monoliths in the area, though even before making it to Nokron, you can take on the regular Ancestor Spirit by lighting all 8 monoliths in Siofra River, after which the horned remains will glow a pale blue glow, warping you into the boss arena, and oh my, what a boss arena it is. As ever in my list, here we have a monster which is not purely beautiful. It heavily resembles an extremely large elk or deer, except one with a particularly deathly appearance, sporting grey skin and an antlered skull for a head. This isn't like the Gravetender Great Wolf or Ava the King's Pet, where the designs are heavily based on real world animals, except just much larger. The Ancestor Spirit looks a great deal more otherworldly than those beasts, though it still retains a lot of natural familiarity, I guess you could say, and despite its somewhat skeletal appearance, it really doesn't look spooky or unpleasant, at least not to me. The visual appeal of the Ancestor Spirit for me is its use of colourful spiritual magic, dousing the area in its damaging essence as it dances through the air. Furthermore, the theme of this boss is death and then rebirth. Although it is possible to charge in and quickly and mercilessly power through its health bar, often whilst you are attempting this, it will collapse down and then respawn at a different location across the arena amidst a blue column of spiritual energy. And it's also one of the very few Fromsoft bosses capable of regenerating sizable portions of its HP back, though each time it does this, the regenerative effects are diminished. Another super cool aspect of the Ancestor Spirit is that it can be reborn from other ghost animals roaming around in the arena, and depending on whether it comes back from a boar, a spring hare or a goat, it will gain a different new attack, with my personal favourite being the goat's rolling attack. What a spectacle. The two Ancestor fights really aren't anywhere near to being among the best in the game, but they are beautiful experiences nonetheless, with a stellar soundtrack, awesome sound design complemented by the cries of animals, great use of colour, and mechanically and conceptually interesting death rebirth moves. Oh baby, we're at the top 5, the most divine monsters and beasts from all of Fromsoft's modern games, and what better beast to kick off the top 5 countdown than Great Grey Wolf Sif. This is of course the third oversized wolf to appear in the video after the Red Wolf of Radagon and Gravetender Great Wolf, but for as nice as those two wolves certainly are, to me, Sif is something more special. Visually, I guess you could see Sif as a sort of retroactive combination of those other two wolves. He has the general wolfishness of Dark Souls 3's Great Wolf, though he is a bit bigger than it, and he wields a large sword in his mouth, though rather than the Red Wolf's spectral red blade, which can be summoned and then dematerialised at will, Sif wields the colossal great sword of Artorias, the untainted one as originally wielded by the Wolf Knight, rather than the cursed one or the corroded and corrupted Abyss Greatsword. Sif truly is enormous, almost mystically so, though this was not always the case. You can see a young Sif being hounded by the aforementioned humanity sprites in the Chasm of the Abyss, and he pretty much looks regular sized here. You can even summon him in for the Manus fight after saving him. It's not clear why Sif later grew to such an outrageous size, whether it has something to do with his time in the Chasm of the Abyss, or if it's from the magic of Darkroot Forest, because this is a place home to many weird and wonderful beings. Then again, size is an odd thing in Dark Souls, especially the first game. I've always loved how large many of the humanoid enemies and bosses are, how some of them are just twice or even thrice the size of you for some reason, because it looks cool. And there's probably an element of that with Sif, who, despite his size, still possesses a very pure appearance. He just looks like a big, beautiful wolf with a big ass sword, which is about 8 times bigger than it logically should be based on the size of Artorias' body, but never mind. Speaking of that sword, another visual effect that I love here is how blue it appears. It even leaves behind blue tracers with each slash and slam. Don't know why, because the actual greatsword of Artorias is barely blue at all, with it only having a hint of colour at some angles, but again, I don't care. The sword looks terrific in this Sif fight, enhancing the magic of the encounter. My choice to place Sif so high in the list above so many other monsters isn't just because of his visual design, but also because of his, well, everything. The only reason Sif attacks you at all here is to defend the grave of his fallen friend, and perhaps to test you, to judge whether you've got what it takes to take on the Abyss. This is also the only case of Fromsoft adding in an additional cutscene to a base game fight with the release of a DLC, where, if you've already rescued him in the Chasm of the Abyss prior to approaching Artorias' grave, Sif reacts differently to your presence, recognising some scent from a different place and age, and howling at the sky before still challenging you to a duel to the death. It just changes the tone of the battle in a really nice and even emotional way, taking any feelings of anger or outrage out of it, but instead, this is just a fight that Sif has to go through with, as do you. You want to talk emotional though? If you get Sif down to critical HP levels without rushing to put him down, he'll begin limping, favouring his left foreleg while he clumsily slashes at you with his greatsword, and it's just so sad. Fromsoft would later do much the same thing with the old Demon King from Dark Souls 3, who I actually consider to be quite underrated, and it's done really well there too, but damn does it sting extra to see the Great Grey Wolf in pain. Truly a beautiful boss encounter in pretty much every way, and, in my opinion, one which carries a great deal of importance to Dark Souls 1's status as one of the greatest games of all time. It doesn't have that status solely because of its level design and progression and combat mechanics and whatnot. It's also the specialness of so many of the game's moments and encounters, and particularly the way they make you feel when you first experience them. Next up, we have something a little bit different. We have a pretty lady. It's crossbreed Priscilla. I guess this is the second time I've came perilously close to defying the rules I set out in my own intro, where I said no dudes in armour or human entities, but once again I'd argue that I haven't actually broken any UK laws there, because Priscilla is not strictly human. In fact, it's in her very name, crossbreed Priscilla, referring to the fact that she is half dragon. I really love it when Fromsoft experiment with unconventional dragon designs, but it really doesn't get any more unconventional than a dragon which in no way resembles a dragon, yet here we are. In fact, just as with the Hellkite Drake, the Gaping Dragon, Seath the Scaleless, the Everlasting Dragon and Kalameet, you can cut off Priscilla's tail for a unique weapon which, although being rather modest in size and design, is actually a dragon weapon which can only be upgraded with dragon scales. Though you can also get your hands on the Life Hunt Scythe she herself uses in battle from her boss Soul. Awesome weapon, but just make sure you've got some bloody good bleed resistance before using it. The Painted World is a totally optional level, and one very easily missable if you don't know the steps to get to it, which makes Priscilla herself an optional boss, except, rather uniquely, even if you do decide to pay a visit to this frigid yet fantastic place, you can still finish it without laying a finger on the lady, without laying a finger on Priscilla. But what if I want to lay a finger on her? No, come on, oi, cut that out. Look lads, we all know the score here. Priscilla is the darling of the Dark Souls 1 community because of her appearance. She's about 14 feet tall, largely resembles a human, and has a very pure aesthetic, being garbed completely in white, woolen clothing with long white hair. Of course, her appearance isn't completely free of anomaly, with her green eyes having those elongated reptilian pupils, betraying her semi-draconic origins, and let's not forget her flowing white tail, which, unlike all other dragon tails we see in the Dark Souls games, actually looks quite soft and fluffy. You'd like to grab hold of it and never let go. And, you know, I guess there are other reasons people enjoy Priscilla too, but let's leave that for now. Like I said though, you can bypass this boss even after entering her arena. Priscilla is the only boss entity in this game that is not immediately hostile to you after encountering them, with her instead beseeching you to leave this cold world to its solitude. But if you're itching for a fight, then you sure can get one by attacking her, causing her to go invisible, with her presence only being discernible from the footprints she leaves in the snow. I mentioned her unique tail weapon, but it can be a grim affair trying to actually cut it off without killing her in the process, because you don't know where on her body you're striking when she is invisible, and she doesn't have all that much HP. That said, the invisibility aspect of the boss fight is enjoyable, and also ties into another mysterious Dark Souls crossbreed, that being Ocelot from Dark Souls 3, who seems to be present throughout the Osiris boss fight as evidenced by the persistent sound of its crying, except at no point do you actually see it, and notably, we never see any other true Dark Souls drakes or dragons with the power of invisibility, suggesting this ability is wholly unnatural and unique to crossbreeds. Lore aside though, and perverted memes aside too, the whole Priscilla experience is a very pure one. Like the painted world of Ariandel from Dark Souls 3, the painted world of Ariamis is not a nice place at all, with death, decay and horror being found around every corner, but this just serves to make the encounter with Priscilla all the more meaningful, where instead of greeting you with violence, this initially benevolent being simply requests that you leave the painting, and if you do decide to slay the white dragon anyway, her dying words and moans make you feel like something of a villain for doing it. By the way, while you're here, might as well highlight an amusing glitch that used to affect speedrunners of this game, but if you killed Priscilla too quickly, there was a chance she would bug out and just repeat her moaning dialogue forever, soft locking the game.
Dropped. I forgot there's no cutscene. 1%, second time, let's go. No way! Are you serious? Are you kidding me?
Top 3 now folks, the gosh darn prettiest, most sublime beings to ever grace a Fromsoft game, and was there ever any doubt that Dark Souls 1's Moonlight Butterfly would be making its magical appearance here? This is actually the 4th monster from the Darkroot region to appear in my list, after the mushrooms, the crystal golems and Great Grey Wolf Sith. But for as much as I appreciate all those monsters, the Moonlight Butterfly is surely the loveliest of them all. As I've mentioned in a bunch of my videos now, my very first Dark Souls journey was not a successful one, being cut violently short as early as the Bell Gargoyles. My second Dark Souls journey years later, however, was just that, a journey, a freaking game changer, just like it was for so many of us back then. I experienced many meaningful moments throughout that playthrough, several of which still remain with me, which I look back on as being somewhat revelatory, as I gradually came to grips with the full scope and majesty of this legendary game I was playing. And I tell you folks, one of those very moments was when I first stepped into the abode of the Moonlight Butterfly, as its heavenly music began to play, as its vast, winged lunar green form floated gently down from above. It came as such as an enchanting shock to me, because I just didn't expect this. I thought this game was just going to be rife with undead soldiers and demons and castles. Not this, not the Moonlight Butterfly. It's not quite a gimmick fight, though it's certainly anything but a conventional brawl. The narrowness of the boss arena makes it so you're essentially working in 2D here. You can either go left or right. The butterfly only has about 3 or 4 attacks too, which you have to wait around and dodge for around a minute until it gently perches on the bridge to nibble on some moss, allowing the more melee oriented attacker to get a few big hits in, though of course if you're more magic oriented, then this entire battle can be played far more offensively throughout. If you want to completely trivialise the fight, then you can simply summon Witch Beatrice beforehand, who for real can take this boss down in about 4 hits, without you having to do a damn thing. Look though, the Moonlight Butterfly is not and was never meant to be super difficult. This is an experience, an atmospheric treat, a slow moonlit dance. Of course, Darkroot Forest isn't the only place where the Moonlight Butterfly can be encountered, with 3 of them also being present as respawning enemies in the Crystal Caves, though I must confess, I've never actually managed to kill one of these things, ever. I gave it a shot here for a while for shits and giggles, but I ended up dying, and I've also got no idea how close I even was to taking it down, because I had my HUD turned off. If you do manage to beat a minor Moonlight Butterfly, however, there's a minuscule chance you'll get a blue Titanite slab for your efforts. Even though I nearly never fight them here, I do still really enjoy these ones, because they really add to the blue magic of the Crystal Caves. Plus, they are initially non-hostile, meaning you can get a very good look at them. At the enormous spiral horns protruding from their heads, one which you can acquire as a weapon from its boss soul, and a look at the enigmatic blue wheel upon their backs, perpetually spinning through some unknowable crystal mechanism. Gotta be honest with you, until about a week ago I had no idea what the origin of the Moonlight Butterfly even was. I just never really questioned it. But as was probably obvious to absolutely everyone else, turns out they were created by Seath the Scaleless. It's not even a secret either. I mean, for a start, it flat out states this in plain English in the item descriptions for the soul of the Moonlight Butterfly, the Moonlight Butterfly Horn, and the Crystal Ring Shield. Furthermore, you find 3 of them in Seath's Crystal Caves, along with a load of crystal golems who were also created by Seath. Lastly, they're called Moonlight Butterflies, and where else does the word Moonlight appear in Dark Souls 1? Oh yeah, the Moonlight Greatsword, which you get by cutting off Seath's tail. It does ever so slightly diminish the magic of this entity for me, knowing that the butterflies are no less artificial constructs than Seath's crystal golems, rather than them being these mystical and divine beings of the forest, but even so, truly beautiful boss and enemy, with an enchanting design, one which provided me with an unforgettable experience on my first true Dark Souls 1 playthrough. For as much love as I've given it through this video, it's time to move on from Dark Souls 1 and its selection of sexy monsters, with an entity from a different game altogether getting the number 1 spot. But before that, we've got number 2 to talk about, Elden Beast. Hard to get right into discussing Elden Beast without first mentioning Radagon. The Golden God's own design is undoubtedly absolutely divine, though he's not an actual pick of mine due to him not really being a beast or monster, and thus he is disqualified from the ranking. Despite Radagon's fractured appearance, he still very much looks a god, standing about twice the height of the player and always having a disarmingly passive expression on his face, as if this battle against a lowly Tarnished is beneath him, with no need for urgency. Radagon never even runs throughout the battle, instead choosing to simply walk towards you, like some grand godly sculpture gifted with motion, his grey clay-like flesh crumbling away to reveal the glowing metaphysical form of the Elden Ring within his very core. Awesome fight and incredible design, but of course, once you've made Radagon a Radagoner, the second most beautiful Fromsoft monster reveals itself, emerging from beneath the waters in a grand display of cosmic colour. Wielding this sacred relic sword, a golden blade literally wrought from the remains of the god we just took down. I found the Elden Beast's name to be very interesting, specifically the beast part, because typically when that term is used in this game it refers to animals, or the anthropomorphic wolf-like beings in Faram Azula, whereas this entity is something far different. The Elden Beast was the vassal of the Greater Will itself, and the living incarnation of the Golden Order, sent down into this world within a golden star. It almost looks like a sort of dragon, and indeed it has wings with which it can fly, and it can breathe golden fire, just like Placidusax can. The Elden Beast does have a far more aquatic character than dragons traditionally do, however, being able to submerge below the water and emerge back out some distance away. Some people have even said that it shares a likeness with the Loch Ness Monster, or at least that classic old photograph of it with its long slender neck and small head. Its shape aside though, what about the colours? The Elden Beast's body is completely translucent, allowing a full and vivid view of its anatomy, consisting of bright bolts and threads of gold, which do not look dissimilar to the grace of gold, except formed into a sort of divine nervous system here, running through the beast's entire body, arms and even wings. Tints of cosmic purple can also be seen within the blackness of its body, and this effect is also present in some of its attacks, where it produces streams and clouds of glittering, exploding nebulae, and the whole galactic and astral element of this fight makes it a real spectacle, a feast for the eyes. I know as a boss, the Elden Beast has its detractors out there, folk who do not enjoy how you have to fight it after beating Radagon, who then has to be re-beaten every time you die. But even when I have had my frustrating deaths to this boss in the past, I've never been able to bring myself to hate or even dislike it, because it's one of the most beautiful boss experiences Fromsoft have ever crafted. Not only is its design stunning, but even most of its attacks feature these grand golden animations with bright colours and exploding stars, and it is sublime. And here we are at the number 1 spot, finally, and indeed this entity is no less divine than the golden beast of the stars we just discussed. This is the divine dragon from Sekiro: Shadows Die Twice. Earlier on I enthused about the beauty of Fountainhead Palace when discussing the Okami warriors who dwell there within its temples, courtyards and gardens. But the entire reason for Wolf travelling to this Palace of the Skies in the first place is to ascend to the Divine Realm for an audience with the Divine Dragon, so as to claim its mystical and powerful tier, a key ingredient towards achieving the immortal severance desired by the Divine Heir. Though if you're going for the surer ending, you can cut the game drastically short and skip Fountainhead Palace altogether. Please don't though. I use the word ascend to describe how Wolf makes it to the Divine Realm, but this isn't quite accurate. Rather, he travels there via a prayer at the very peak of the palace after a perilous, thunderous climb past a sequence of Okami warriors and Torii gates, and upon making it there, the realm appears precisely as heavenly as you would expect, a rolling sea of clouds surrounded by an infinite blueness, with forests and mountains visible far into the distance. Bit of a shock at first though, because rather than being greeted by some mighty dragon, the old dragons of the tree appear, looking unpleasant and sickly, like old rotted wood given animation. These beings are simply the precursor to the actual fight though, with a true divine dragon appearing in a yellow flash of lightning, its long pale form extending from a vast bed of cherry blossoms, armed with a 100-foot sword, aglow with the power and splendour of the heavens. I've spoken about dragons a lot on my channel, because there's a lot of them in Dark Souls and Elden Ring and such, a few of which make for god tier bosses in my eyes, like Placidusax and Bale, and Dark Eater Midir is a goddamn champ as well. But the Divine Dragon is rather different from all those, not only from a mechanics point of view, but also its design. This is by far the most Eastern styled dragon from these games, in stark contrast to those from all the other games which are largely more Western and Arthurian in their designs. The Divine Dragon on the other hand doesn't breathe fire, doesn't have any wings, and wields a sword very much like a human would, though observe that it only has a large right arm, with its left one appearing to have been cut off, just like how Wolf's was. Mind you, although they're easy to miss, the dragon does have an additional very small pair of arms closer up its body towards its head, though those don't appear to be performing any actual function throughout this fight. The Divine Dragon very much resembles an extremely long, slender, pale, dragon-headed serpent, throwing out vertical and horizontal sword/projectiles from the point in the distance from which it is rooted. The Divine Dragon's appearance is a major part of why I've given it the number 1 spot, but that's not the only reason why. As is the case with pretty much every other higher ranking monster encounter in my list, this is an experience. It's not just an enemy to be defeated, a moveset to be learned and then dealt with. I mean, it's kind of a gimmick fight in that you can't even damage it via direct attacks, instead being forced to use bolts of divine lightning, which Wolf captures in his sword from the risen tree roots. The Divine Dragon really isn't even very difficult. What it is though is an experience. The infinite blue beauty of the Divine Realm, the sight of this towering serpentine dragon in the distance, its outraged roars, the rolling sea of clouds, its giant sword, all these dramatic elements combine to form a goddamn moving work of art, one which is completed by that impossibly powerful soundtrack. One which swells and soars to impossible heavenly heights as this beautiful battle plays on until the climax where Wolf collects a gracious gift of the tears of the Divine Dragon before leaving the Divine Realm forever. And there you have it, folks. There is my list of Fromsoft's most beautiful entities, from the humble blue drake all the way to the Divine Dragon, from the phosphorescent slug all the way to the moonlight butterfly. Really would have liked to pick something from Bloodborne and to have had more stuff from Dark Souls 2 and 3, but when I was putting together my list, Dark Souls 1 just kept winning out. I always want to have a somewhat balanced selection when it comes to making these sorts of videos, but that is of secondary or even tertiary importance to me compared to just making the actual selections I believe in, and in an appropriate order. But for God's sake, do not hesitate to let me know your own picks down in the comments too. Which FromSoft monsters do you find the most beautiful? Not only in terms of their visual designs, but also their lore, and even the levels or arena in which they appear, as well as their soundtracks. And with all that said, folks, as always, cheers very much for watching, and cheerio.